Well, officially welcome everybody to this short presentation on an introduction to the Cambridge PET exam. We always call it PET. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but with the PET exam, the B1 exam from Cambridge. All right. So in this presentation, I just wanted to go through a little introduction in the beginning, give you a breakdown of who is taking this course, why they're taking this course, this exam, sorry. Where in the world they are, why would they do it, and also just break down on each part and just go over it very briefly to show you what it all consists of and what the student needs to do. And then I'm going to do another 4 of these presentations where I'll go into each part individually, and we'll do it in much more depth and much more detail, and do it from the perspective of a teacher teaching a student, so that after you've completed these 5 modules, for example, you can then say that, okay, you've had training in this, and you can start preparing other students for this. Of course, you won't know everything that there is to know, and that just comes from repetition. You're going to have to go out there and do the exams yourself. There's a lot of resources, and we'll get to those as well later on. I'll give you some links to download. It's also in the teacher's handbook that you've downloaded now. There are some examples in the back, and you can go through the test and do it yourself and see what is expected of the student. Okay? So let's get cracking. Who am I? Okay, so first of all, who's this presenter and why should you listen to anything I have to say? My name is Jody van der Westhuizen. I did a TEFL course many years ago now. I've been teaching English as a second language for about 14 years. I've prepared in that time thousands of students for the Cambridge exams, literally thousands. I been working in Spain in private academies. And what they focus on here a lot is the exam, is the Cambridge exams, the preparation for the B1, the B2, the C2, all of those exams, even from the little kids. I've had from 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, up to 66-year-olds doing all the different levels. So as well as preparing the students, I worked for Cambridge as an exam center supervisor for 5 years. I started just as an invigilator, assisting the supervisor, and then I got promoted to the supervisor role. And I've had exams where I've had 200, 300 people in a room that I've had to supervise and invigilate and make sure no one's cheating and everyone has everything ready. And yeah, so it's very stressful. And I've also seen the inside from the teacher's perspective and from Cambridge perspective, exactly what is going on. And I can give you some tips and tricks that'll help you, and that you can also share with your students to calm their nerves and give them as much information as possible before they go into the exam. And also I've been training and coaching teachers now for the last 3 years with eTEFL Online. So what are the Cambridge exams? The Cambridge English Assessment is a department of the Cambridge University that provides English language assessment exams based on the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. Often referred to as CEFR. If you've done our TEFL course, we have mentioned this in it as well, so you'll be familiar with that. The certificates they issue are internationally recognized by governments, schools, universities, and employers all over the world, all right? One of the differences between this and the IELTS exam is that this exam never expires. Once they've got this certificate, then they have, sorry, I'm just gonna have to, so yes, so when you do this exam, you can pass and fail. There is a pass and fail, whereas with the IELTS exams, there's no fail. They just give you a band. But that certificate for the student is only valid for 2 years, and then they have to take that exam again. Whereas this certificate, I think this B1 level costs around 150 euros to take the exam. So it's very expensive, and you can fail it. But once you've got that certification, you've got it for life. You never have to do it again. So that's one of the bonuses. And it's just as internationally recognized and accepted as the IELTS. IELTS. All right, so what are the Cambridge exams? What are the levels? So there's the A1 and the A2 and the B1, B2 and C1, C2. So it's broken up into 3 different bands. We're going to be focusing on B1 today, the preliminary English test. This one is the most commonly taken. In my experience preparing students and doing the exams, this is the big groups. That big group that I mentioned where I had 250 people in a room, it was a B1 exam. There's also a version for schools. So let's just look at it over here. This is the basic user, is the A1, A2. Independent user is the B1 that we're talking about today. The B2 is the FCE, or upper intermediate, and we go up and up and up. So we're talking about this today, the B1 intermediate. So there's also a for schools version. Now, in the for schools version, they need exactly the same level. They need exactly the same grammar and everything else that's included. It's just that the questions, instead of in the standard exam, it will be, you're going on a work trip, write an email to somebody, something, 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 you know? So instead of that, for schools, they'll say you're going on a school trip, write an email. So they'll just change the topic a little bit so that it's more relatable to the younger learners. But otherwise, the presentation and the level is exactly the same. So who's taking these? So students from all over the world: Mexico, Poland, China, like I said as well. Spain is a big, big country that takes this a lot. Mostly to get into universities. A lot of it is for university entrance if they want to go and study in the UK or the USA, Canada. These certificates are also used for immigration purposes, work residency visas. I know Australia specifically asked for a C1 level if they want to, prove that they have a level of English to work and live in Australia. Students may also be taking these exams to get better employment opportunities in their own countries. I know here in Spain, specifically on the coast where it's all touristy, even the waiters need to have at least a B1 level, and they put it on their CV. And if they don't have a good level of English, they're not even going to get a job. So this can really, getting this certificate can change someone's life. So we need to be careful with it, and we need to be serious with it. And that's why I wanted to do this training, because there's a massive market for it. If you want to go freelance and you want to add this to your CV, it's only going to add credibility to you, right? So this is a bit of an older PDF, sorry, a little PowerPoint that I made. It says there are 5 main areas. Now in the 2020 exam, there's now 4 main areas: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The use of English is now just sprinkled in between everything else. It was testing their grammar and tenses. It used to be a part. Now it's part of the reading and the writing, and they'll look out for it as well in the speaking and in the listenings. So we'll jump into that right away, actually. Let me flip through the screens here. So about that exam. So here are the 4 parts. Now, if you've got your PDF open as well, we're on page 5. And you can go down to this part over here. The reading is 45 minutes long. There are 6 parts and 32 questions in total. The writing is also 45 minutes. It's 2 parts. And the second part, part 1, is a writing of a letter or an email. And the second part, there's 2 options. It happens a lot that the students do both, but they don't have to. They have to do 1 writing in part 1 and 1. They can choose between which one they want to do in the second. But we'll look at that in more depth later on. Listening as well. Listening is approximately 30 minutes, and there are 4 parts to that and 25 questions. And then the speaking is normally 12 to 17 minutes. There's also 4 parts to that, and we'll get into more in depth into how that looks in a moment. So let's just break it down now. We're going to jump ahead to page 7. So in the reading, part 1 of the exam. Now, when the students do these exams, they can either do them paper-based or they can do them computer-based. The computer-based one is not online. They can't do it from home. They'll still have to go to an exam center and be supervised and invigilated, but there'll be computers there. So a lot of students like to type instead of write out everything by hand. So if they can write a story, it's much faster. Also, listening, I found, has been an issue. That's probably the biggest issue I encountered over 5 years. Sometimes we would do it in schools, and in a classroom, there would be a little radio that you'd put the CD in, and the echo would be horrendous, and the people would really struggle to understand the listening part. Whereas in the computer-based exam, you can bring your own headset and your fancy earphones or Sony's or whatever and plug them in, and the sound is crystal clear. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Some people just don't like working with computers, or they're not computer literate and they do the paper-based. So whichever one, they're still going to be the exact same test. So part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5 and 6. We'll have a good look at these in a second. So it's mostly multiple choice. They're going to see some pictures. They're going to have to read some longer texts and then fill in some gaps or choose A, B, C, or D. In this reading part, there's a lot of reading, obviously, and not lots of writing. If they have to write something, it's probably just 1 word to fill in a gap. We're going to jump ahead to page 10 now, where there's a little exam that you can have a look at and some of the examples. So for example, in this task, the candidates have 5 short texts with each text is one multiple choice question with 3 options, A, B, or C. So they get a little picture, and they have to be able to identify a sign or an article or a text message, and they'll give them the pictures like this to give them context. So you see it's on a mobile phone, this text message, so that's how they'll know about it, okay? All right, so the candidates should read the text and decide what situation it would appear in. And that's why I said they give them clues as to the situation. This is a sign on a door of a laboratory. This is on a mobile phone, so it's a text message. They can use the visual information, the layout. They should read the 3 options and explain, and then, the candidates then need to compare each option with the text before choosing an option, choosing an answer, and then explain that it is important to read the chosen option again to check that the meanings match. So that means they should read this, then they read the 3 options, choose one, and then double check again. And you'll get this with your students a lot. They never read the question and they never double check. You need to drill that into their heads, even the adults. Doesn't matter if you've got kids or adults. In my experience, they never check their answers. All right, so I'm not going to go too much into detail about this, but this is basically what part 1 looks like. Part 2 is a much longer text that they'll have to read. The questions, for example, important here, for example, questions 11, 12, 13, and 14 will be in order of the text. So 11 will be found in paragraph 1, 12 in paragraph 2, 13 there, and 14 there. But question 15 focuses on the general meaning of the entire text. So what is their understanding? So they need to be able to not only identify specific information here in the text, but also get the general gist of it. All right, and then in part 4 is 5 sentences have been removed from the text below. For each question, choose the correct answer. So they'll have to put the missing information in here. There are 3 extra sentences which you do not need to use. So this comes up a lot. So there's 5 spaces, and on the next page, we don't see it here in this example, but it is in the example paper at the end of this booklet, is another page with 8 phrases or 8 sentences that they need to put in there. So they've taken out 5, added an extra 3 to make things a little bit more complicated. So there's going to be 3 that the students don't have to use. Okay, so they need to get what I always taught them was read what comes before that space and then read what comes after the space. So you can get an idea of what's missing in the middle. Don't just read up to there and then try and fill it. What comes after? That may have context to the answer as well. Okay, part 5 of the exam, of the reading exam, is A, B, C, or D. So they get a text again, but in this case, it's just one word that is missing, not a phrase, and the answers are here at the bottom. And they'll have 3 extra ones that they don't need to use in each line. So they have to choose the right one. Also important, read what comes before, read what comes after, because the context may change after, or it may give you more information about something that has previously been mentioned. So this is all things that you could bring up with your students. So the spaces are designed to test mainly vocabulary, but also an element of grammatical knowledge may be tested. All right, so it's mainly vocabulary, this one. In part 6, all right, for each question, write the correct answer. Again, they've left out 5. Was it 5 this time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, more. They've left out words that need to be replaced, but this time, as you can see below, there's nothing. They have not given them any answers. This, they're going to have to think of the word. So this is a bit more difficult for them. There's no options to choose from. So this task is designed to test candidates' knowledge of grammatical structures, but there is some testing of phrasal verbs and common fixed phrases. So phrasal verbs, if you haven't learned about those yet, or you don't know about them, for example, take out the rubbish. So we take a verb and we put a preposition together usually, and we make a new verb with a new meaning. So these are very, very difficult for non-English speakers, because normally when you put those 2 together, that verb and that preposition, they have no meaning whatsoever to what they previously had separately. So that really throws them. It's something that you're just going to have to teach, and repetition and practice and repetition and practice. There's no sense to phrasal verbs, as I used to tell my students, all right? So that's something you're going to need to know, but not a lot of them. At B1 level, they're not expected to know hundreds and hundreds of phrasal verbs. Like, for example, at the end of a letter, I look forward to hearing from you. Look forward. Okay, so that's another phrasal verb, and drill that into them, especially when they're doing their writings. They can always use that, and it gives them bonus points at Cambridge. Okay, so that was the reading part, part 1 of the exam. We're going to skip ahead now to page 20 in your book, where the writing tasks are. So paper 2, writing. This is also 45 minutes. Now, each part accounts for 25% of the exam total as well. All right. So if they pass part 1 and part 2, they're halfway there. They can even fail part 3 completely and then make something up in the speaking. So they don't have to get a global 60% on every single part. They need to, it's on the entire exam. Okay. So they can fail one part completely and still pass if they, do really, really well on the others. So in this one, we've got 2 parts. Part 1 is 20 points and part 2 is 20 points. So in the first one, they have to write an email, about 100 words, answering the email with the notes provided. So they'll give you an example of what you need to write and what content you need to include. And then in the second part, they have a choice between an article or a story. So a lot of your students are not going to be natural story writers. A story is kind of difficult to write. And a lot of my students would write something like, yesterday I was on the bus and then I got a phone call and then I had to do this, all in the past tense, thinking it's a story. But that's not a story. You're just reporting what happened yesterday. A story needs to be creative writing. Story needs to be past simple, past perfect. 2 things happening in the past, one ahead of the other or one after the other. So there's a lot to go into story writing, which is why I told my students, look, if you're not a creative writer just naturally, then maybe just stick to the article. So that's up to you and up to your students as well. If you want to teach story writing, if you have a creative writing background, then go for it. Okay, so we're going to jump to page 22 to look at the writing task. So here's an example. Candidates must answer this question. And it's also important that they read the questions. Some of them just don't even read that first part. Read this email from your English-speaking friend, Sandy, and the notes you have made, okay? So say which I prefer, me too, no because, and ask Sandy. So they need to be able to ask something. Let me know if you have any questions, okay? They need to know these phrases and how to structure a question to ask for information. Say which you prefer. I prefer this. I prefer that, etc., etc., etc. So they'll give them this exact picture, but obviously every exam will be different. It'll be a different topic, but they'll give them like little lines, giving them information that they need to include, and it will be there. If they write 95 words or 105 words, it's fine, all right? Round about 100 words. But if they go far over, they will be penalized. And if they only write 50 words, they will be penalized as well. But there's no fixed number of words bracket that you can exactly give them that they're going to be happy with, depending on the context and whether or not they've answered the questions correctly. We're going to jump down to the next part. So here's part 2 where they can choose 2 things. They can choose question 2 or they can choose question 3. Drill this into them as well, that they do not have to do both, just one. So films, for example, what kind of films do you enjoy? So you have to write an article about a film and what kind of films you enjoy, or in this case, you have to write a story, and they'll always, if in the story, give you the first sentence. So as the plane flew lower, Lou saw the golden beaches of the island below. How the student finishes after that is up to them. And that's where it gets very creative and very difficult for a lot of the students, okay? But teaching writing is something that you're going to have to do. So for example, when you're preparing students for these kind of exams, listenings and writings, especially now that you're doing it online, listenings and writings that can be done at home, because the writings, you can give them the paper, they can go download the question paper from the website. You tell them, go download this, here's the link, and here's the link for the listening. And they do it at home as homework, because there's no way you can sit on a Zoom call for 40 minutes watching them listening to something, all right? So it's best that they do it. You, of course, can have a class where you explain what needs to be done and how they need to do the listenings, et cetera, and what needs to be. You can have a writing class and show them how to write and what they need to include, but the actual tasks can be done at home. And then your actual live classes can be the readings, so you can correct pronunciation and help them with the answers and stuff. And also the speaking. The speaking, of course, that's a no-brainer, has to be done live with you as well, which you can go through. All right. Then listening, we're going to jump to page 37. Listening tasks. In listening, we got 4 parts. So there are 7 questions, 6 questions, 6 questions, and 6 questions. So again, we've got multiple choice, gap fill, and multiple choice again. All right, so this is a total of 25 of the exam. Let's go to page 40 for some examples. So part 1. You can see the PET or the B1 exam is very visual. There's lots of pictures to help them. When you get up to B2 now in the first certificate, the pictures are gone. Then it's a lot of text. All right, so in part 1, there are 7 short listenings, each with a question and 3 visual images. So they'll listen, and in the listening part, they will hear every question they'll hear twice. They'll also, before the question starts, they'll be given a few seconds to read through the questions. So before part 1, they'll be listening on the CD and it'll go, bing, you now have 20 seconds to read the questions. And then everybody will sit there quickly just going over. And I always told my students, read the question and then underline the important information. So for example, on this one, I don't know if you can see it, it's very small. What did the girl buy on her shopping trip? So information, girl buy, because that's very important. There could be a listening and there could be a boy and a girl talking and a boy telling you what he bought, and that's irrelevant to the question. So you've got to make that clear to them as well. And they always mention all 3 things. They won't just say, the girl bought a lamp. They'll say they went to the shop to look at lamps, but then they saw a bookshelf, but in the end, they decided to get a cushion. So always listen to the end, because they might throw the answer in, and they have many times right at the end of the listening. So tell your students as well, listen to the end. Don't just think, oh, you heard lamp, circle B. No, wait and finish the question. All right. I know I'm speaking to you like my students, but it's been drilled into me after years and years and years. Okay. So always best option to go through all the things and underline some key phrases so that they can listen for it. And also, they're not going to be doing word spotting, which means if you see the word plane or whatever, in the listening, they may say aeroplane. So it's not going to be the exact same word. They got to know some synonyms, and they got to understand the general meaning of the listening to be able to connect the two. All right, let's jump down a bit to the next one. Listening part 3. So this is that multiple choice, the gap fill. You've got to listen. So they've got to listen, and they've got to put in one word. So for example, you will hear a radio presenter called Anita talking about her holiday in Cuba. So then they have a couple of seconds, probably 20 or 30 seconds to go through this again. And they can underline some keywords. So they've got, okay, National Gardens, that sounds important. Attracted most people. Just put a quick pencil mark underneath that. I'm talking as if they're doing the paper-based. And that's another note as well, side note, that when they do the paper-based, the question paper is theirs. They can write on it, scribble on it. They can draw pictures, doodle. They can underline. They can do whatever they want. At the end of the exam, that paper is being destroyed. So whatever. As long as they transfer their answers neatly onto the answer sheet, that is a separate sheet of paper, they'll have no problem. All right, so they'll be listening, and again, the answers will come in the order of the listening. They're not going to be jumbled around. So they'll listen, and they only have to put in one word in there, okay? Then we can skip down to the next page, listening part 4. Here's where it gets a bit more complicated, okay? So in listening part 4, he has no more pictures, and it's a bit more text heavy. So you will hear an interview with a woman called Vicky Prince, a champion swimmer, who now works as a swimming coach. So Vicky's going to be being interviewed on the radio. They have to listen to specific information. And again, they will have time beforehand to go over the questions, underline some key lines over there, 1 or 2 words. And that's something you can do with them and teach them in your preparation classes. Oh, I'm running out of time. So yeah, it's something that you can help them prepare for, that they get into this habit of skimming text and underlining keywords. And then, of course, they'll listen to it twice. So they can have a go on the first one, circle B, and then listen to it again and either confirm it was B or change it to another one. So they will have two attempts at listening to this. And there's some more of that. We're going to jump ahead now to page 51 to have a quick look at the speaking and the speaking task. So in the speaking task, we have 4 parts. We have a 2-minute part, a 3-minute part, a 4-minute part, and a 3-minute part. So the first part is just from the interlocutor, breaking the ice, getting to know the candidate, trying to get them relaxed, asking them some general questions. And then part 2, they'll have to describe a photograph for 1 minute on their own. And then in part 3, they will have to describe again a picture and then discuss it with their partner. So the speaking will be done with another partner. There'll be 2 students or 2 examinees in that room taking this and they might not know each other. It might be 2 random strangers, whoever's they put together at the exam center on the day. Those are the 2 people doing it together. Obviously, if it's just for schools, they normally try and keep the school classes or the classes together and the friends together. But if it's an open session, then there's no guarantee. So in this part, they have to make suggestions and discuss different alternatives and come to an agreement. Well, they don't even have to come to an agreement. They just have to negotiate. If they disagree at the end, that's fine. And then part 4 is an extension of part 3. So whatever the theme was in part 3, it'll just be an open discussion again. The interlocutor will just ask them questions based on what they have just spoken about and how it relates to them normally. So let's just jump quickly forward to page 54. Okay, so there's some typical questions you may see. They'll just say good morning, good afternoon, whatever time they come in. Also remind your students to greet the examiners. They're so nervous most of the time that they just walk in and stare at them. So as they come in, just tell them, all right, you remember to say hello, how are you, and introduce themselves, all right? So the interlocutor will introduce themselves and then there will be 2 examiners in the room, one who's just doing the speaking and giving them the pictures to look at, and another person they're sitting behind and to the left who's doing all the marking and checking that they're hitting all the right grammatical points and pronunciation and all of that stuff. And then some other questions they may ask: do you have a job? Do you study? This is a good example of the schools version. They wouldn't ask them, do you have a job? Obviously, if it's for schools exam, they will ask them, do you study? Or what's your favorite subject at school? Or some such. And if it's a normal one with an adult, they'll ask about jobs. All right. That's just to break the ice. Then in this part, in part 2 is when they have to look at a photograph. So for example, they'll give them a photograph and say, here is your photograph. It shows people learning a language. I'm going to jump ahead to page 59 is where here we go. It's a bit sideways. I don't know how to rotate it, but you can look on your own, your own PDF. So they'll show people of learning a language. What they have to do at this level at B1, they don't have to insinuate what people are thinking and feeling. They just have to describe the photo. I see 3 people sitting in a library. They are writing with pens. There are 2 girls and 1 boy. He is wearing a blue shirt. Other things they may want to include is in the background. I always taught them that. In the background, in the foreground, on the left, on the right, those kind of things. Prepositions they're going to test. In their hands, they are holding pens. Behind the girl, there is a bookshelf, etc., etc. Okay? So that's what they're going to be doing. Each one, candidate 1 will have this photo and candidate 2 will have that photo, or vice versa, whatever they decide. Then I'm going to skip back to part 3. After they've done their 1 minute of talking on their own, they will talk together on a subject. So in this case, a young man works very hard and only has 1 free day a week. He wants to find an activity to help him relax. Here are some activities that help him. Talk together about different activities and say which one could be most relaxing for him. So they have their instructions. Talk together about the different activities and say which would be the most relaxing. So they have to talk about some of them. Let's jump ahead and look at the example. Here it is. He has this man at work and he has some things, reading a book, painting a picture. So for example, they would say, okay, I think that sitting on the armchair reading a book is a good idea. Maybe he likes to do this. Maybe he likes painting. And then the other one says, no, I disagree. Or yes, I agree. And then they talk to each other. At this point, the interlocutor is not involved at all. All right. This person, the examiner, is just sitting there watching them. And you must remind them that they must talk to each other. It's trying to simulate a natural conversation. It's never going to be natural because it's a very artificial environment, but as natural as possible. And just make sure that they both understand that they're talking to each other in this point. All right. And they don't have to use all of these pictures. They can use they can talk about 3, talk about 2. If the conversation flows naturally and it uses the 3 minutes up, that's fine. They don't have to hit every single point. All right. And then, as I said, part 4 is an extension of what they just spoke about in part 3. So about relaxing. So for example, here, what do you do when you want to relax and why? So then again, the interlocutor will intervene and start speaking to them individually and saying, what do you like to relax? And the person has to say, oh, I like to go to the beach. I visit with my friends, blah, 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 blah. And all of these things. All right. So that's just a quick overview. A lot of it is in this PDF for you to look at. Have a look at it in depth. There's a lot more that you can go on. And then probably, I don't know, next week or as soon as I possibly can, I'll start putting together more in-depth ones. And the next one will probably start with part 1 and we'll do the reading part and go more in-depth into that. And that's that. That's the time we have for the moment. I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that people may have. Are there any questions? Nobody? You can put your mics on now if you want to ask a question.
Hi, Jody. Belinda here.
Hey, Belinda, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Well. Thank you for asking.
That's good. I don't actually have any questions. I just wanted to say that it was a great webinar. Very informative. I've always been a bit afraid to actually go into the teaching of, like for people going for their language exams and stuff like that. So it's given me a bit more confidence. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad it's helping. All right. What did you guys think? I mean, I know this is just an introduction to it. It's just a brief overview, and we'll definitely go more in depth on each part. But as an introduction, was everybody happy? I mean, did I hit the right marks? Was it worth half an hour of your time?
Definitely.
All right. Thank you, Belinda. Who else is there?
Hi, Jody. It's Elaine here.
Hello.
Yes, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I just wanted to find out, you mentioned the cost would be the euros is 115. Is that something that we would need to pay for this certificate?
No. That's what the student is going to be paying. So it's important. Okay. That's why I want to do these trainings so that you don't waste their 150 euros.
Okay.
Yes, these students are paying lots and lots of money for these exams, and they can fail it, and then it's goodbye 150, and they have to pay again if they want to take the exam. So if we're going to get into this, let's make sure that we know what we're talking about and that we can really help them achieve it. So also before, I mean, if you're going to do this freelance, you're going to have a couple of training sessions and mock lessons with the student first to figure out if their level is sufficient for this. They should already have a B1 level, and you can download level tests, and there's websites that they can do level tests to check this out. And you'll know as well when you're speaking to them, like, all right, after you've done a few of these exams yourself, you will know. Because what you shouldn't be trying to teach people or get their English up to the level B1 so they can take this exam. They should already be there. And what you're doing is showing them how to pass this exam. That should be the aim of it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jody.
All right. Anybody else? Oh, I have to upgrade to Pro. It's telling me I have 1 minute left. Well, I mean, we can continue talking. It's just we'll stop recording in 1 minute. Anybody else? Think of somebody? Lynette?
Hi, Jody. Yeah.
Hi.
I did the session with you yesterday, so it was nice to do it today again, and it was comfortable to follow along and so on. So this is really very interesting to me, and I'm really enjoying it. So thanks. It was a good session.
Thank you. It was better than yesterday's session, at least clearer to follow along.
It was great. Thank you.
All right. Pleasure. Have we got anybody else?